Good morning, everybody, and welcome to RFI Group's Australian Banking Innovation Summit 2021. My name's Alan Shields. I'm the co-founder and Chief Data Officer of RFI Group, and it is my very great pleasure to welcome you all along this morning to what is the start of a three-day summit. This will take place during the mornings of each of the next 3 days, and we're really looking forward to sharing with you some fantastic content from our speakers and our partners as we go through this agenda. Of course, none of this would be possible without those partners. And so I want to say a very, very big thank you to four principal partners: Backbase, Creditor Watch, Investnet, Yodlee, and Encino. It goes without saying that when you host an event like this, there's a significant amount of effort that goes into it. And these partners make all of this possible. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that today we have over 450 registrations for this event, which makes it one of the largest events that we've ever held. And so we're really looking forward to sharing some great insights and some great content with you all. As you go through the day and over the next couple of days, if you've got questions, we would encourage you to put those in the Q&A. Chat, and what we'll do is we'll answer those either in real time during the presentations, or if there's no time allowed for those, we will get back to you with any answers to your questions that are pending. And so really we want this to be a forum in which we can discuss and really get to the heart of any issues and interests that you have as we go through the agenda. I'll just spend a few more seconds talking about RFI Group. For those of you that don't know us or aren't very familiar with us, RFI Group is a global financial service focused insights and data firm. We cover 48 different countries within the insights and data that we gather, and we talk to over 500,000 consumers and over 100,000 SMEs and corporates just about financial services, banking and payments. And of course, we distill those insights and that data for our clients, who are the world's leading financial services organizations. As we go through this agenda, I think what you're going to notice is that there's an awful lot of focus on innovation, and that is, rightly so. But we're going to be talking about things like customer experience and personalization. We're going to be talking about the future of digital lending. We're going to be talking about ESG and other initiatives. We're going to be talking, of course, about buy now, pay later. We're going to be talking about financial wellness and the impact on consumers. And we're going to be talking about small businesses and how they're looking to recover from the pandemic that we've been through over the last year and a half or so. And so it's a really exciting agenda. I'm really looking forward to getting into it. And I have also, as well as being asked to introduce the summit, I've got the very great pleasure of kicking us off with the first presentation, which is about data and greasing the wheels of innovation. I think when you look through the agenda that we're going to be going through today, you'll see that there's an awful lot of it is contingent on the data that you, within your organizations, generate, that your customers produce, that you can get from external third parties. And not only getting that data, but also then using that data. And so, as I see it, this presentation, I think, sets the scene for the rest of the agenda. And for those of you that know me, you'll know that I'm very, very keen and very focused on data and how we can use data to better inform the actions that we take. I have been accused in the past of liking charts and graphs a little bit too much. I get very excited when I see data represented in a visual format. I make no excuses for that. But for those of you that haven't seen one of my presentations, I just use that as a forewarning for you. I have a relatively low excitement threshold when it comes to data and to charts. And you're going to see plenty of that as we go through. There are a few things that I'm going to talk about specifically today. One of those is, where does data sit within a data-driven organization? I think it's fair to say that you'll work for organizations that, if they aren't data-driven today, are becoming increasingly data-driven. It is a trend that we're seeing around the globe. It is not a trend which is confined to financial services, but it certainly is a trend that we are seeing within financial services. We're going to talk about two separate things within that trend. One of those is democratization of data, not a term that I was very familiar with a year ago, but a term that I'm becoming increasingly familiar with. How do we get data across our organizations? How do we give access to data to the people that need it the most, no matter what their role? And then how do we use that data in the most effective and efficient way to generate optimal outcomes for our customers and for ourselves? And then we're going to talk about ingestion and sharing of data. So how do we bring data in from other parties, and what are the trends that we're seeing there? And of course, the consumer data right and open banking has a big role to play in that for many of your organizations, particularly here in Australia. We're going to talk about RFI's role in the data economy. We, pride ourselves on being a very, very data-driven organization. We have been collecting data and insights in financial services around the world for the better part of 15 years now. And so it's very, very significant the role that we will play in this new data economy. And I'd love to share some of our insights with you. And then we're going to talk about the evolution. So what goes on from here? How do we think about data delivery in this new economy? How do we think about the usage of that data in this new economy? And really, what are the things that we need to be looking out for as we listen to the rest of the agenda today? So those are the things that we're going to be focused on. And I welcome your questions. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have as we go through this. Equally, I'm happy to answer questions after the fact. So let's get stuck in. So let's start off, I think, with the position of data in a data-driven organization. It was a question, I think, that we posed to ourselves around the beginning of this year. We wanted to understand amongst our clients, so amongst the banks and the technology firms that use RFI's data and insights increasingly, both here in Australia and around the world, how are they using data themselves within their business? We know what we do and we know how we deliver that to our clients, but we wanted to understand what was the sort of pathway from here. How did our clients see that evolving? And so what we did was we embarked upon a series of customer research interviews. It's as a customer research focused organization, we do an awful lot of interviewing of consumers, small businesses and corporates on behalf of our clients and our customers. But what we don't do necessarily that frequently is a formalized study of our own clients where we talk to them. And so that's what we did. And we set up, and many of you that are dialing into this will have participated in these, we set up a series of interviews with our customers, with people in different roles within those organizations to understand how data was being used, not just RFI data, of course, but data that you collect yourselves, and as I said before, data that your customers generate for you, and how that was evolving. And what we saw several themes, but the biggest theme overall, of course, was democratization. And I mentioned that before. Almost every organization that we spoke to as part of this was talking about how they can get data into the hands of the right people in the right format at the right time. And that really cuts to the heart, I think, of what we're going to be talking about through this slide. I've put down here a few of the quotes that came out of those interviews, and they for me typify the responses of the individuals that we spoke to. As I said, what we were asking was, how are you using data within your organization now? And how do you see that data usage evolving? So one of the things, obviously, is that the people we were talking to oftentimes were in insights roles. So they were in centralized customer insights teams. And what they were seeing was increasing demand from their stakeholders in understanding what data was being gathered, what that data meant. And they obviously would have questions that were generated off the back of that, partly through curiosity, but also because of business need. And I think that's endemic of the fact that we are seeing more and more people who are in product roles, or traditionally in roles where, customer data wasn't necessarily at the heart of what they, what they did on the day-to-day, becoming increasingly at the heart of what they did. And so that's driving that desire for, or that thirst for more data and more insights into the data itself. We also heard from organizations that were saying that as a business, they were becoming more data-driven. As a business, that they wanted to make decisions that were less based around gut feel and more based around data and evidence. And that was obviously something that came through. We saw lots of mention of data visualization. So we heard about Tableau, but we've also heard about Looker. We've heard about Power BI, other tools that will enable people within your organizations to access data, to better make decisions, to monitor KPIs, to understand what's going on within the business at the click of a button. There's more and more interest in raw data. So as an organization that collects a vast amount of data, we typically haven't seen a great deal of interest from our clients and our customers in wanting to get access to data in its raw form. But that's changing. I mean, that's been changing for the last couple of years, but I see that change accelerating. We're getting more and more institutions asking us for raw data. And that raw data, there's a recognition, I think, there that it might be a bit slow to use in the first instance as organizations learn what that raw data means and how to process that raw data. But essentially, we're seeing that thirst and that desire for the raw data come through much more strongly. We're also seeing, people wanting to facilitate access to data and to interrogate the data. There's a lot of talk of self-serve. And, inevitably, when we're talking about self-serve with data within your organizations with stakeholders that aren't necessarily in a data analytics role, that requires a simplification of the data. That requires a visualization of the data to a level that we haven't seen up until now, but we are beginning to see, and we will see a lot more of going forward. Now, of course, not every organization is, at the forefront of becoming a data-driven organization. But it's fair to say that every single client that we spoke to was on the spectrum to moving towards becoming a data-driven organization. There was no organization that we spoke to that said that they wanted to use less data than they are currently. So that was really interesting for us. That was really insightful. And that gave us a really good understanding, I think, of where we needed to be within the new kind of data economy that we're about to see. The other thing that we saw, of course, was sharing of data with third parties. And partly this has been driven by initiatives such as open banking or the consumer data right here in Australia. And it's a trend that we're seeing around the globe. We've been tracking it through studies that we've been conducting. I've just got a slide here that shows you, for example, awareness of open banking and the consumer data right by age group within the Australian market. This was a study that we did earlier this year. Very, very interesting to see. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that 9 out of 10 of your customers is knocking on your door asking you why you're not enabling them to share data with other third parties or asking them to share their third-party data with you. But what I am, I think, sitting here saying is that customers might not necessarily understand or be aware of the terms themselves, but what they are interested in are the outcomes. And that's really, I think, what's most interesting is when we talk to you about how you're using data that you're collecting from third parties, or how you're innovating around data that your customers are sharing from you with other organizations, then we're looking at improvements in customer onboarding. We're looking at improvements in pricing and tailoring of products and personalization generally. We're looking at improvements in switching and retention and proactive retention. We're looking at behavioral predictions that will enable organizations to better service customers and in many cases enable organizations to get in front of a customer change before that customer necessarily knows what they want to do. And so it gives you the opportunity to really add value in those customer interactions. So I think that's really interesting, right? And so data, as I said at the beginning, data at the heart of innovation is increasingly a truism. And when you look down all of these use cases here for open banking or the consumer data right, you see that they are all things that will potentially be of benefit to your organizations, but undeniably will be of benefit to your customers. And so that, I think, is where the interest comes from. It's not necessarily that the customers are knocking on your door, but it is that they're asking about open banking, but they do want a lot of these aspects here, starting with customer experience. And it's fair to say, I think, that in today's world, consumers have access to more data than they've ever had before, but they also have access to less data today than they ever will have in the future. So every day we get access to more and more data, and they see organizations outside of financial services using that data for great effect, and they increasingly expect you as an organization to be able to provide that. So democratization, sharing of data within organization, and sharing of data outside of the organization are really two of the big themes that we're seeing, and we're going to see that through the course of this agenda that we're going to be going through today. Now, I'm very proud of RFI, and I see us as playing a big part in this new data economy. One of the things that I think that we can really kind of talk about is that we have a world-class data asset. As a business, we've been collecting data, as I said, from 48 countries over 15 years. And that gives us a huge amount of data that we can draw upon, and the organizations, our clients, can leverage to great effect. Just here in Australia, if I just isolate Australia, we have a huge database of customer insights. We talk to more than 120,000 consumers and small businesses just in Australia every year. And I believe that makes us one of the richest data sources of customer insights in financial services in the Australian market today. And of course, our clients get to benefit from that. And our clients are, pretty much the who's who of the Australian market. We have every organization of any significant size subscribing to our insights and therefore consuming our data to make decisions. That includes, the traditional incumbent organizations, that includes second tier banking organizations, that includes mutuals, that includes non-banks and monolines, that includes fintechs and tech fins. That is, organizations that are 200 years old, organizations that are 6 months old are using RFI's data in a way that enables them to make decisions about what they're doing. And some of that data is unique. We've been tracking, for example, buy now, pay later in the Australian market for, the better part of 4 years. In the data that you can see just on this slide, for example, we're looking at awareness of different brands that have been operating in the market. And we've got everything from organizations that have been in the market for the whole time. So, going back 4 years and beyond, like Afterpay, like Zip, but also organizations that have entered the market in the last year or so. And we're also tracking, organizations like, and they're not on the chart, but PayPal, that have entered the market in the last year, like CBA's Step Pay product, like Spot, new brands that are emerging in the market. We're enabling our clients to understand how those brands are cutting through. We're enabling clients in other markets to understand how the evolution of buy now, pay later in Australia, which is a very mature market globally, is playing out, and how that's likely to play out in their markets. Who's going to win? How are they going to win? And in which customer segments are they going to win? Obviously, the devil is in the detail, and we have the detail. We know where these brands are cutting through and how they're cutting through in different ways. And that's incredibly valuable. And I think probably, as an organization that wants to be at the forefront, you need to be onto the next thing. Buy now, pay later 4 years ago was the next thing. We're always looking out for tomorrow's next thing. But we mustn't forget the basics. And one of those basics is around quantification of opportunity. we have a hugely rich data source at our disposal in Australia called Expert. Expert is effectively a means of understanding what the market composition is, how it's changing, and where customers within the market have their balances, are looking for products, and also how they feel about the different brands that they're operating with because of customer experience metrics. It's a survey of more than 5,000 consumers that we do every month, so 63,000 consumers over the course of a year. And what we've been enabling our clients to do is to understand, well, if we look at the next 12 months, what's the pool of people that's going to be in the market for a new product? You know, how many people is that? For example, just in the next 12 months, how many people are going to be in the market for a credit card? And the answer is that it's about 2 million consumers. Now, obviously, they're not necessarily people that don't have a credit card already. They're people with credit cards. They are people with it that don't have credit cards, but they're in the market for a credit card type product. Will they end up with a credit card? Will they end up with something else? That's the question. And we through this survey are able to kind of to quantify what that opportunity looks like, and also where that opportunity lies for different organizations. So if you look down the bottom, for example, in this chart here, we're looking at what proportion of consumers would go to their main financial institution for that product. And we've broken that down by the different types of product. So whether that's transactional accounts, savings accounts, credit cards, whatever it is, what proportion of people that are in the market for those products are going to go. And one of the biggest trends that we've seen over the last few years, and you can see it on that chart, is that the proportion of people that say, I'll go to my main financial institution has eroded compared to 2.5 years ago, when, you know, many more people thought of their main financial institution first. So having that kind of data at your disposal is really, really very important. And what's also really very important in that equation is understanding how that market is changing and what you need to do about it. And, you know, which brands are likely to win within that environment. So, you know, if we want to look at things, you know, propensity to take out products at a brand or at a segment level, we can do that. And, you know, one of the, and we can derive insights off the back of that. And I think it's important, you know, not just to look at the surface of the data, but to understand what lies beneath. And one of the things that jumps out at me from data like this, for example, is the extent to which Westpac has this kind of inexorable rise within the data around consumers that are in the market for a credit card that are saying that they're going to go to Westpac for that credit card. Take a step below this and understand what it is that's driving that, and you find that it's actually driven by, you know, cohorts in the under 30 age group who are being attracted to Westpac through its savings proposition at the moment. And obviously they've got a very interesting and an attractive savings proposition for younger adults. And that's driving propensity to take out credit cards with them. Couple that with the fact that last week Westpac launched a sort of a buy now, pay later style offering in the market, and, you know, you've got the recipe for a success. All of that comes through in the RFI data. And then, of course, there's revenue. So sizing, forecasting revenue, our data, we're enabling our clients to understand how big the market is, how that market's growing by segment, whether that's by age, whether that's by income, whether that's by your own institutional defined customer segments. But because we've got such a rich data set, particularly here in Australia, that enables us to facilitate the understanding of the size and growth of the market. And so I see us being a very critical part of the roadmap forward in terms of data. I mean, our data is already being used for product development, for, as I said, market sizing and modeling, informing things like next best action, understanding the effectiveness of marketing strategies, targeting particular customer groups with particular products and services, customer segmentation, you name it. I think our data is part of all of those decisions in many of our clients, both here in Australia and globally. So we're in for an interesting ride, I think. And I think the only question that we need to ask ourselves now is not, are we going to be using data in the future, but how is that data delivery and usage going to evolve going forward? One of the things that was interesting when we did those customer research surveys at the beginning of the year, when we were talking to you and your colleagues about how they were using data, is that it became clear there were three types of persona, if you like, within your organizations there, and we've broken those down generally by business users, insights users, and data users. Business users being people that work in marketing, product, strategy type roles. Then there's the insights users. These are typically sort of your more traditional customer insights teams, or customer insights and strategy teams. And then you've got data users, and data users are the analysts and the people that work in data analytics roles. And all of them had different wants. Some of them wanted to be able to, a business user doesn't want the data for the data's sake. They want to be able to identify what the market looks like, or the size of the market. The insights user needs to be able to provide their stakeholders with the right insights, and the data user wants to be able to integrate that data within your own systems. And so, I think that's really important, that sort of realization. And I understand when any kind of persona type work like this, that we're generalizing across groups, and there will be people who work in insights that also want to be data analysts and analyze data. But generally speaking, these were the three personas that we came up with. We looked at their challenges. Do they want to be able to manage that data centrally? Do they want to be able to integrate that into BI systems? Do they want to be able to build propensity models? Do they want to be, do they want their lives facilitated because they don't want to have to keep going backwards and forwards with organizations and with individuals within the business in order to get questions answered and wait on turnaround times? Do they want to have simple, easy to use data at their fingertips? And how do they want that delivered? I mentioned at the beginning that every organization that we spoke to was on a road towards becoming a more data-driven organization. But not everybody was, at the end of that roadmap, and indeed hardly anybody was at the end of that roadmap. But some organizations just want Excel data tables, and that's fine. Some organizations are happy with PowerPoint presentations, but some organizations want the raw data. I mentioned that before. Some of them want, to be able to manipulate that within statistical tools. They want to be able to integrate that into data models. But what was really important to us, I think, was to understand what those different personas look like, so that we can help to deliver the data in the best possible way. And I think that really is the kind of byword for this, is how do you facilitate access to that data in an optimal way? Is it through, securely transferring that data? Is it API access? Is it data visualization? What is clear is that, in the past, we've always been an organization that has delivered data through PowerPoints and PDFs. And I don't see that changing, but I do see that we'll need to be able to deliver that data through other methods. And the methods that we need to deliver that to will depend on the persona and what is optimal for those personas. And then I think the next step, and we hear a lot about AI and machine learning. As a side note, I tend to see AI everywhere I look, and I don't know if that's just because my name's Al, but it sort of jumps out of me. But I do see it more and more mentioned in banking. I don't think many of our organizations are at the stage where we're leveraging AI or machine learning yet, or effectively, or as effectively as we want to, but we're all looking in that direction. And so it's kind of inevitable that is where we'll be going. So I'm going to conclude with a few bullet points, because then I want to get into the agenda. I really want to listen to what some of the speakers have got to say. I want to take part in the discussion that's ongoing. What we must think about, I think, as we go through this, is that data is at the heart of every innovation we're seeing today in financial services. Within financial services, there's this program of internal data democratization, and external data sharing. And that is really shifting the parameters of what's possible in terms of the innovation that we can deliver, both within the business and to our customers. Going forward, what we're going to see is that the manner of data delivery is going to evolve. And we're not sure where that evolution will lead us to exactly, but at its heart, it will have the objective of delivering data in an optimal way for the stakeholders that we're dealing with. Whether those are stakeholders within your own business or you are the stakeholder, you will have an optimal means of consuming data, and the delivery will need to talk to that. Most businesses aren't there yet, but what we will see is machine learning and AI increasingly used, and that will give us the ability to, determine propensity and to anticipate outcomes that ultimately lead to better results for both our customers and us as institutions. And I think that's really important, because everything that we're going to be talking about today, whether it's streamlining of lending processes, whether it's customer experience and personalization, whether it's the evolution of buy now, pay later, the recovery of SMEs coming out of the pandemic, risk and better indexing, any of those things will lead to better customer outcomes and more efficient organizations run by smarter people, because they've got data at the heart of what they do. So thank you very much for listening. I look forward to hearing your questions.